The next project that we're going to work on is going to be based around the idea of vanitas. Now, vanitas is a Latin word meaning vanity, and loosely translated, it corresponds to the meaningless of earthly life and the transient nature of all earthly good and pursuits. Now, this may seem a little dark or a little deep, but trust me, you will have fun with this project. So, the next project, it has two goals. One is that we are going to create a still life, and we are going to paint it using a grisaille underpainting, and we're going to learn how to glaze in colors. So it's kind of a dual fold project. But to start off, you have to create a Vanitas still life. Now, Vanitas references really a specific style of painting. It comes from around the 16th and 17th centuries in Northern Europe. And Vanitas, it was a common genre at the time. Painters were interested in using or allowing the viewer to decode images to understand them for deeper meaning. Oftentimes that deeper meaning has to do with kind of the transient nature of life, the futility of pleasure, the certainty of death. This was sort of in the grips of the Protestant Revolution, so you can see there was a lot of dark things going on. People were really thinking about the meaning of life a lot, and so you see that as a common theme in painting at this time as well. So those things being said, looking at this first painting, do you see anything that might have a dual symbolic meaning? Every single object that painters at this time placed into their still lifes was placed there for very specific meanings. They saw them as being able to have this dual meaning. So there's a few things that stand out. We won't go over every single object in here, but trust me, every single one has a meaning to it. The first thing that you notice is maybe the candle. Now, a candle has a symbolic meaning in a lot of religions. It can sort of show spirit. It can also reference life. When the candle is lit, it means that the life is going. You'll see in a few more of these future sides, you'll see the candle has been snuffed out. That could reference a life ending. There's some other symbolic meaning in this piece. If you notice, there's an actual psalm there. The Lord is my shepherd. So it actually references a psalm that has something to do with going into the afterlife. Next to that sheet of paper, you see a lemon. A lemon was a common symbol. Lemons are beautiful on the outside, tart, bitter on the inside. It could kind of reference how maybe some people are. There's also a reference, another biblical reference there with the slingshot and the stones, sort of David and Goliath. There's wine just behind that, meant to be the Holy Sacrament. Flowers are another common symbol, often shown at different points in their life cycle. That can have some symbolism to it as well about life. The helmet, the shield, and the sword having to do with chivalry. And then the eye just behind there is oftentimes seen as being the all-seeing eye of God. So this, like I said, there's many, many common themes that you'll see repeated. In this one, we see the same kind of sort of flower in different life cycles, the skull symbolizing death. This one has a few different references. You see sort of the big stack of books. Believe it or not, at this time, some saw sort of this endless pursuit of knowledge as being frivolous because you could not take that studying into the afterlife. Um, you can also see the coins and the other kind of dice down there at the bottom, showing, like I said, that sort of futility of certain pursuits. You can't take all this money with you when you die. You see that little cherub there on the left. He's blowing a bubble. Bubbles were really common symbolic image because, a bubble only lasts a sort of short period of time, then it pops and it's gone, sort of referencing life in some ways. And that really creepy guy in the background that's lifting the sheet and pointing to the image, that's an actual painting that he's revealing that's showing the Last Judgment. So you can see there's a lot of sort of dark symbolism in here, although initially looking at it, you might not realize how dark it actually is. So as we go through these, once again, you'll see a lot of those common symbols, the bubbles, the skull. This one has seashells because seafood can often be interpreted as beautiful to look at but bitter to taste. It's considered sort of a moralistic genre painting, meaning that when people were to look at these, they already knew what they were. It all fits into this Vanitas genre, and they knew they were meant to look at it as sort of a moral visual tale. It is something for you to think about. You have to pick the objects for your still lifes. Obviously, there's some repeated themes that you see in these images. Your themes don't have to be as dark as the Vanitas paintings. It doesn't have to be sort of this dark moralistic tale. It could really be a tale about your life. So you can tell whatever story that you want to tell. Just another couple symbols that stand out in this one. We see the flowers in various life cycles here. Music is another common theme because music has a beginning and an end. So often that's used to talk about sort of the symbolism of life on earth. Rotting meat or rotting food is another sort of symbolism that you'll see. Oftentimes you'll see little picture art or other little images within an image. That's something you could think about doing too. Now, as you're setting up your still life, arrangement matters. You can end up everything really neatly arranged, very organized. Oftentimes, Vanitas paintings, you can see things sort of chaotically placed around in the still life, or stacked or teetering in different ways. Think about making an interesting composition first and foremost, but you can use the way that they're placed to tell a story as well, how one thing leads into the other. Lighting is very important when setting up your still life. You should have a single light source and have very light highlights and dark shadows. It's going to be important when we go to do the glazing process that your underpainting has very high contrast. So having a high contrast image to work from in your still life will be very helpful. Also consider your background. Your background is a part of your painting. It could be a nicely set up sheet like you'll see sometimes. In this situation, it's a wood backdrop. Something has to be there. So you could have it very complex, you could have it very simple, but it's something you have to consider as well. Make sure you choose colorful objects. We are going to be glazing the color onto this piece, so you need to have color in order to do that. Things that have pattern or other kind of little detail pieces are actually not as difficult as they look in this glazing process. You do all your detail in the black and white layer, so actually the colorizing little patterns or little details like that are actually a lot easier than they look. So, so when you're thinking, this can take it kind of any form that you want. If you really, really want to use a skull for this piece, I can maybe let you borrow a skull from school if you bring it back to me. You can also just use objects around your house. You can think about, um, using fresh flowers or things that um, are withered or food, especially because we're working from a photograph. It's going to give you the opportunity to do things that maybe wouldn't hold up over a very long still life. Um, and you're thinking about modernizing this idea. So, what are some modern symbols of frivolity or life and death? Or if you want to choose a different moralistic message, you could choose your objects that could tell a story towards that message, right? It doesn't have to be necessarily about life and death. It could be about struggles that are going on in your own life, struggles that are happening in the world, right? Um, but your objects should tell a story. Now, looking at this image here, this is a work by Audrey Flack. We'll look at a few of hers. Hers are from the 80s, so not quite modern day, but a lot more modern than those Vanitas paintings. You can see she uses that same symbol of a candle, but she's got some slightly altered images, right? We have lipstick that can be used to talk about vanity, right? The hourglass that can be shown to use the passage of time. You can see here she has the same kind of skull that we've seen in a lot of them symbolizing death, but she's also using a mirror. If you notice, there's a dual mirror image happening there. The mirror on the right is totally white. When that you see that mirror in the reflection, it has a rainbow color. And Audrey Fleck talked about the idea how mirrors can be portals. So she's kind of playing around with what you're seeing in the mirror. You could totally do something fun like that, like change something if you want to use a mirror and sort of use it to alter reality. Um, you can see she also has uh, some tarot cards and some other things that might kind of lean to talk about luck that aren't necessarily a part of that Western Christian religion thing that we saw happening in some of those previous Vanitas paintings. So you can think about, like we said, we're thinking about images that have to do with morality. So she chose images that were important in her own life. And Audrey Fleck did a lot of these, right? She really thought about things that not only had a symbolic meaning, but also symbolized aspects of her own life. So you often see some very personal items in her pieces. This is thinking about to that tradition, this is a traditional 16th century Vanitas painting, sort of showing the gluttony of everyday life. If we thought about modernizing that, would it look something like this, right? Our sort of frivolous feast of modern day life. And Flack thought a lot about these things. She often brought in personal images, images of ancestors, uh, images from her everyday life. She often puts the paint right in there because she saw herself that painting was a part of her everyday sort of happenings, and it's what she did for a living, so obviously it was important to her. And these paintings, they can be very detailed. She also uses the grisaille underpainting process that we're going to be using, so it allows you to get a great amount of detail, sort of very lustrous, interesting colors and things. And she sometimes has them set up as a traditional still life. Sometimes she's looking down on them, like she takes the image from above. That's something you could consider too when you're setting yours up. It doesn't have to be like you're looking out onto something, it could be that you're looking down onto something. And feel free to crop into your images. It doesn't have to be set up in that same traditional Vanitas way that we saw. You could have parts of objects, you could have edges. Think about using your whole space as your composition. In your photograph, you should do that. You should crop it to exactly the way that you want it to look in your final piece. So for this week's assignment post, you're going to create a still life with 3 to 5 objects, or more if you want to. You don't have to limit yourself, but you have to have a minimum of 3. Consider the symbolic meaning of the objects that you're choosing. So you want to actually think like you're telling a story and that you have a reason for picking the objects that you choose. You should have a single light source. Dramatic lighting is very good for this project. Remember, you want to have very dramatic lighting. Make sure that your objects have color. The process that we're going to learn about for this painting, your objects have to have color in them. Consider the background. So you could use a sheet, stacked object boxes. You want to have things going on within the background itself and make that interesting. So you should take at least 3 images. It could be the objects arranged the same and you've decided to crop it 3 different ways. You could have different objects, different arrangements, but you want to have at least 3 options so that I can help you choose one, and you're going to upload them to this assignment post. Oh, typo, should say post. All right, so that we will get started on this project next week.